Part 1 showed how dealer add-ons get into the deal before the buyer ever clearly says yes. Part 2 showed why the markup is the business. Now in Part 3, we were going to talk about control. This is where we stop just explaining the problem and start dealing with it directly. Because the dealership has a system. The buyer needs one too. The goal is not to argue. The goal is not to get emotional. The goal is not to get embarrassed or rushed. The goal is to slow the deal down before signing and force every add-on charge into the open. Can it be removed? Can it be reduced? Can it be offset somewhere else in the deal? Those are the 3 moves: remove, reduce, offset. Before the buyer signs, there is still leverage. After the buyer signs, the conversation gets harder. So in Part 3, we are going to focus on what the buyer should do before that pen hits the paper. The dealership has a system, and after our discussions, the buyer will get one too. Before the buyer argues over an add-on, the buyer needs a system. There are only 3 moves: remove it, reduce it, or offset it. Remove means the charge comes off the buyer's order completely. Reduce means the dealer lowers the price to something closer to reality. Offset means the dealer keeps the charge on paper but gives the buyer value somewhere else in the deal. A lower vehicle price, a higher trade-in allowance, or another documented credit. The mistake is arguing blindly. The buyer should not get pulled into a long debate about whether paint protection, nitrogen tires, or window etching has value. The better question is simple. What are we doing with this charge? Is it coming off? Is it being reduced? Or is it being offset? Before signing, every add-on needs a path. Do not argue blindly. Choose the move. The first move is to separate the add-ons from the rest of the deal. Do not negotiate a blended number. A blended number is where everything gets mixed together. The vehicle price, taxes, required fees, optional add-ons, protection packages, warranties, and dealer charges. Once everything is blended, the buyer loses visibility. The dealer can say, this is the total, but the buyer may not know what is actually being charged, what is required, and what is optional. So the buyer should slow it down and separate the numbers. First, what is the vehicle price? Secondly, what are the taxes and legally required fees? And finally, what are the optional add-ons? Those 3 categories should not be buried together. If the add-ons are optional, they should be shown separately. If the dealership says they are required, ask them to show exactly why. The buyer does not need to argue as yet. The buyer needs visibility, because once the charges are separated, the buyer can decide what to remove, what to reduce, and what to offset. Make them show the charges separately. Move one is simple. Remove it. If the add-on is optional, take it off the deal. That should be the buyer's first position. Not reduce it, not split the difference, not roll it into the monthly payment. Just remove it. The buyer should ask one direct question. Is this optional? If the answer is yes, then the next sentence is take it off the buyer's order and recalculate the total. That matters because an add-on is not really removed until the paperwork changes. A verbal promise is not enough. The buyer needs to see the charge crossed out, removed from the total, and reflected in the final number before signing. Paint protection, nitrogen tires, window etching, door guards. If the buyer did not choose it, did not approve it, and does not want it, the buyer should not pay for it. Do not get pulled into a long debate about whether the item has some value. The issue is choice. If it is optional, the buyer has the right to say no. And once the buyer says no, the total must change. Do not pay for what you did not choose. Move two is reduce it. Sometimes the dealership will not remove the add-on completely. They may say it already is installed. They may say it is part of the vehicle. They may say every car on the lot has it. Do not stop there. If they refuse to remove it, the next move is to reduce the price. The buyer should not accept the inflated package price just because the item is already listed on the paperwork. Ask for the real item price. What does this actually cost? What is included? What are you charging me for each item? Why is this package priced at this amount? Then reject the inflated number. If the dealer wants to keep the add-on in the deal, the buyer can say, I am not paying that price for it, reduce the charge, and recalculate the total. The important part is the recalculation. A reduced add-on only matters if it lowers the final total. Do not accept vague promises. Do not accept we'll take care of it. Do not accept a lower monthly payment without seeing the actual price charge and change. The buyer needs to see the reduced charge on the buyer's order. Then the buyer needs to see the new total. If they will not remove it, cut the price. A reduced add-on must reduce the final total. Move 3 is offset it. This is the move when the dealer will not remove the add-on and will not reduce it enough. At that point, the buyer should stop arguing over the label and focus on the net deal. If the dealership insists on keeping the charge on paper, then the buyer should require equal value somewhere else. That means the add-on charge must be offset. There are several ways to do that. The dealer can lower the vehicle price. The dealer can increase the trade-in allowance, or the dealer can apply a documented credit. The dealer can give the buyer something of real value that equals or exceeds the add-on charge. But the key is this: the offset must be real, it must be written down, and it must show up in the final numbers. If the add-on is $1,200, then the buyer needs at least $1,200 of value back somewhere else in the deal. Not a vague promise, not a verbal assurance, not a lower monthly payment that hides the numbers. A real offset means the buyer can point to the paperwork and see where the money was returned. The buyer should say, if you are keeping that charge in the deal, then show me where you are offsetting it. Lower the selling price, raise the trade-in value, add a written credit. But do not ask me to pay more for the same deal. That is the point. If they will not remove it and they will not reduce it enough, then offset it. Do not pay more for the same deal. Get value instead. Of course, before signing, the buyer must check the final numbers. This is the step that protects everything that came before it. If an add-on was removed, it must be gone from the paperwork. If an add-on was reduced, the lower price must be shown clearly. If an offset was promised, it must appear in writing. A verbal promise is not enough. The deal is not changed until the paperwork changes. That means the buyer should look at the buyer's order line by line, where the optional add-ons, were they removed? Was the package price reduced? Is the trade-in allowance correct? Is the vehicle price correct? Are the credits actually listed? Was the final total recalculated? This is where many buyers make a horrible mistake. They hear, we took care of it, and they sign too quickly. Do not do that. The buyer should not sign based on what someone said. The buyer should sign only when the new total matches the deal. If the paperwork still shows the old charge, the charge is still in the deal. If the total did not change, the buyer did not receive the benefit. So before the pen hits that paper, stop and verify the numbers. Removed means removed. Reduced means reduced. Offset means written down and reflected in the final deal. Do not sign until the new total matches the deal. If they will not fix it, do not sign. That is the buyer's strongest leverage. Before the signature, the buyer still has control. After the signature, the buyer is trying to undo something that has already been agreed to. So if the dealership says the add-on cannot be removed, will not be reduced, and will not be offset, the buyer should pause the deal. Do not argue in circles. Do not let the pressure build. Do not let anyone rush the signature. The buyer can say, I am not signing this paperwork unless the numbers match the deal. That is not rude. That is not unreasonable. That is basic protection. If the paperwork still includes charges the buyer did not agree to, the buyer should keep the paperwork. Step back and review the deal before moving forward. And if the dealer refuses to correct the numbers, well, the buyer must be willing to walk away. Yes, that is hard. The buyer may want the car. The buyer may have already spent hours and hours at the dealership. The buyer may feel close to the finish line, but that is exactly when mistakes happen. The deal is not final until the buyer signs. So the rule is simple. If they will not fix it, do not sign. This is the buyer's system. The dealership has a process. The buyer needs one too. Do not follow their pace. Do not follow their pressure. Do not let the paperwork control the conversation. Use your own system. First, separate the add-ons. Make sure the vehicle price, required taxes and fees, and optional add-ons are shown separately. Second, choose the move. Remove it, reduce it, offset it. Do not argue blindly. Decide what should happen to each charge. Third, recalculate the total. If something was removed, reduced, or offset, the final number must change. Fourth, sign only when the paperwork matches the deal. Not when someone says, we fixed it. Not when someone says, don't worry about it. Not when someone says, we'll take care of it. Only when the buyer's order shows the corrected numbers in writing. That is the system. Separate the charges. Choose the move. Verify the new total, and then decide whether to sign. Do not follow their process. Follow yours. Do not let unwanted charges slide into the deal. Use the buyer's system. Remove the unwanted charges. Reduce the inflated prices. Offset anything the dealer refuses to remove, and then check the final paperwork. The corrected numbers must be clear, written, and reflected in the total. The dealership has a system, and now you do too. Okay, friends, let's stay connected. Please remember to subscribe, like, and comment. And as YouTube viewers, you know how important that is for us. Thanks for watching and listening, and we will see you and look forward to it in the next episode.